Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero, producer and host of the Break It Down Show. Our guest today is Bob Taylor. He's the co-founder, along with his partner Kurt Listug, of Taylor Guitars. Bob made his first guitar in his high school wood shop in 1972, and that was it. He was hooked. He went on to work in a guitar shop called American Dream, where Kurt Listug was already employed, and before long, in 1974 to be exact, the owner of the shop wanted to sell. Well, the boys bought the shop, and it seemed like an American dream, all right, and it was. They were learning to be guitar manufacturers while learning to be businessmen while learning to be adults. It was hard work, and the first several years, like every American dream, were rough going. Fast forward 46 years, and Bob Taylor is, in many ways, the custodian of the craft. Taylor Guitars has now more than 750 employees around the world, and they set so many of the standards of acoustic guitars and semi-hollow electric guitars as they successfully straddle the worlds of mass production and old world craftsmanship. The Break It Down Show correspondent and player of Taylor Guitars, Lynn Mayhew, sat down with Bob at the NAMM show to talk about their now famous love for the wood that makes these instruments and what it means to be a good steward of such a precious and vulnerable resource. Now, speaking of precious resources, you know around here we like to support folks who take care of one of our most precious resources, our human resource, and more specifically, our military veterans. And to that end, we support Save the Brave. They help veterans cope with PTS, and you can read about them and lend your support, if you so choose, at savethebrave.org. And about the Break It Down Show, please let your friends in on it. Pass that link around, reach back to us if you'd like, John at breakitdownshow.com for me, or Pete at breakitdownshow.com for old Pedro. And we both want to hear from you on this topic, or whatever you have that's interesting. Also, get yourself a t-shirt or a hoodie and show everyone how cool you are. We'd also like to thank NAMM, the National Association of Music Merchants, for being such a great advocate for music and for bringing us all together every year and all year long. If you're not a member, you should become one, and you can at namm.org, namm.org. If you're thinking about it, you should do it, namm.org. And to get to Taylor Guitars, they're at taylorguitars.com. So here's our man in the field, Lynn Mayhew, in the first of what we hope will be many great conversations chronicling the good work of our special guest today and our new friend, Bob Taylor.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, I'm Bob Taylor, and welcome to the Break It Down Show.
Thank you, Bob, so much for being here. I know you're just so busy during the NAMM 2020.
Well, we have a relaxed moment here for a second.
Right. It's, of course, I'm a long-term fan of Taylor Guitars.
Thank you.
Going back to 94 when I first picked one up in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Wow.
But my background as well is in building sustainability. And I must say Taylor has as many different sustainable programs going on, almost as many as you have tone woods that you offer.
Yeah, we have a lot of initiatives to lessen the waste, use material more wisely, put back.
Right. Mm-hmm. So if you could expound on some of the more recent ones. I know you have the Ebony Project and the Urban Ash Project.
Yeah, well, 8 years ago, we had an opportunity to purchase an ebony mill in Cameroon that had been there for 12 years, was owned by a Spanish man. The opportunity was presented by a musical instrument wood supplier in Madrid who are colleagues of ours and even suppliers of ours called Madinter. They heard about this. Long story short, the two of us bought that. But along the way in the purchasing process, we found out the difference between legal wood and illegal wood.
Right.
And in that country, it's a country that operates on bribing. We call it bribing. They have an age-old, form of society that's, if you want something from the king, you give the king a gift. And then that filters all the way down to anybody that has a stamp that you need, or an approval that you need, or a permit that you need. And of course, we went in with zero tolerance, which is shocking to them. We didn't do it, so it was an uphill battle from that. I like to say the first step in sustainability is legality. You're not going to ever really get sustainable if it's not legal, because if it's not legal, people are stealing wood. What's the difference between a legal piece of wood and an illegal piece of wood? First and foremost, taking it from the correct places. I try, and people are like, wow, that's kind of, I'm not sure if I understand that. And so I'll say, well, if you went away for the weekend and you came back and your beautiful front yard tree was gone and all there was left was a stump, you'd think someone stole it.
Right.
So there are areas where you can cut trees and areas you can't. I saw photographs of a story yesterday where people were actually stealing city trees, cutting them down. It was almost like a movie where they're dressing up. They're doing it in broad daylight. They're dressing up with a truck that has like fake company on it. They have fake orange vests. They tell the neighbors, well, we're here from this such and such arborist utility company. These have to be taken out. And they're just cutting down gigantic walnut trees in locations around the city of Los Angeles and stealing them in broad daylight.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So there's even thievery going on right here in a city. That's a stolen tree.
Right.
And we all think about that. So imagine if let's say you get wood from Peru, but the people in Peru are crossing the border into Brazil and taking trees because they're easier to get there. Right. So with ebony, there's tight slivers where you're allowed to get it if you have a permit. Mm-hmm. The permit's hard to obtain. It expires every year. You have to reapply, and then you've got to go out there and do that work, and then you've got to stay cooperation payment free all the way to where that thing finally is on a ship and has left the dock. So that's quite hard. And so we do that. We've done very well at that. And then we have another side to that company, which cuts wood for profit to supply people like us and others like us. The bowed instrument industry, for example. We use ebony, and I'm now making the handles for the buck knife, the folding 110 Hunter. They're the knife that really put them on the map that they've made for 50 years. It was originally ebony, then it wasn't, and now it is again, and on and on. But beside that, and equally as important, maybe more important, is what we call the Ebony Project, and that's a replanting program that's done through UCLA, who formed the Congo Basin Institute in Cameroon from Professor Tom Smith, who's the director of the Institute for Environmental Research at UCLA. And he's spent 35 years in Cameroon, back and forth from Cameroon, living there for years, learning his biology and ecology. And I just fund that myself. And so we're years into that, and $1 million+ dollars. But now, since that is a nonprofit, we're starting to attract some other outside people who want to invest into the expansion of that. And that is, simply put, is taking villages and literally paying them to plant ebony trees, providing them with the knowledge, but at the same time giving them fruit trees, permaculture, food source.
Right.
And this thing, we could talk for a week about Cameroon, but this actually gets all the way down to the land tenure, who owns the land, who owns the tree, and it's something for their future, but with an immediate return, because they start growing fruit, which a lot of these guys don't know how to be farmers yet. So this year we managed to get 5,000 trees in, 5,000 ebonies, It took us 3 years to figure out how to grow those saplings and get them old enough to bring out there. I'm saying this year, that was last year, 2019. This year we have 20,000 trees available to go in. Can we get coordinated to put 20,000 in? I think we'll be able to get 10, 12,000, but it's growing each year. So that's just a glimpse of that. And then we've started.
I recall reading about, the beginning of the Ebony Project, and what I've learned about sustainability is that it seems like the perfect marriage of people, planet, and profit.
Mm-hmm.
That you need all three legs of that stool in order to keep it balanced.
Well, I believe in business as the solution
right.
for environmental problems.
Right.
And a lot of environmentalists feel that business is the problem. But I totally, completely disagree.
Right.
People say, we got to stop them from cutting down those trees. Well, who's them? And why are they cutting down trees? The same person who says that is usually on his way to Home Depot to buy some 2x4s, right? In a car.
Right. Absolutely.
There isn't not one example of man improving his living condition without using the environment.
Absolutely.
There's not one example. If you're a survivalist, you still have to figure out how to make a tool from the environment, make a shelter from the environment.
Right.
Right. And what is enough? When have we gone too far? I don't know. Am I to say? But I was talking with a guy. I think each one of us need to learn that we all use these. There's 7 billion people all in competition for fuel and fiber. I was talking to a guy once at a party who had kind of checked out of the world, and he's a clothing designer, and he wants to disassociate from everything that seems industrial and get natural, and all of his clothing was only made by very specific things that fit his ideas, his philosophies, that everything else was a little bit evil.
Right.
But he has an iPhone, and he has a blog. And I go, isn't it great that you can live in a world that's so wonderful that you can check out, you can move sideways and live this life and tweet about it with satellites that are traveling around the world, with producing electricity and all the infrastructure and the cloud and the generators that are running all this stuff, so you can take this high-tech thing out of your natural pocket, type in what you think about what's wrong with the world.
Right.
Right? And he's like, wow, I never thought of that. I go, it's a great world, isn't it? Great world we live in. It's a miracle. The grocery store is a miracle. You wouldn't be able to be an architect. I wouldn't be able to be a guitar builder if it weren't for the farmer, because we'd be spending all of our time growing food. I know, because I grow my food, but it takes a full-time gardener that I pay 40 hours a week to do it.
Right.
So that I have time to go to work.
Right.
And it costs money. And so farming is amazing. Even being able to go out and get trees, convert them to lumber. We go to the store and buy it. So I think as a society, we've disassociated ourselves with the earth, and we think that somebody else is the person who's doing the damage.
Right.
But we're all doing the damage.
Right.
We're all doing the damage. And so I always try to bring that message. Well, what damage? Is it damaging for us to improve our lot? No. So the way you view it, the way you said, is completely true. To me, the only thing that is sustainable in the long run to help the environment is if you can make a living off the environment.
Right.
So it could be a tribe that makes a living by killing animals and eating them, picking fruit and eating it, making a shelter out of the stuff and living a life that none of us would want to live. Even if you take some guy who's off-grid in Alaska, he can only survive if that supply plane comes every once in a while.
Right.
He's not surviving any other way.
Right.
Right? So, to me, if you try and solve all the problems, sustainability problems through philanthropy, only philanthropy, the project dries up when the funding dries up. And philanthropic funding doesn't last forever.
Right.
But if I can use some ebony, make profit, use some of that profit to fund programs that teach people how to plant ebony, get that in the ground and get that going. I think that's good. So you mentioned Hawaii. No, you mentioned urban forests. I'll touch on that for a second. But we have another operation in Hawaii that we do what we call conservation forestry. So we go into an area that's been depleted, somebody's private land, and we make an offer to harvest the koa trees. If we flew over, I'm going to back up. If we flew over areas and we look down, you can say, that area is doing great. You fly over another area, you go, that area could be fixed. You fly over another area and you go, that area is gone. All we can do there is to just try and stop the weed invasion and the insanity. So the area that's great, you can kind of leave alone, or maybe you put a nice sustainable harvest going on it that lets it recover on its own. The area that can be fixed, there's still something there to fix it. Like the patient's still breathing.
Right.
The patient's breathing. And what is the definition of the patient's breathing? There's koa on there that has value, that a lot of those trees, if they were people, they'd be on walkers with oxygen. They're at the end of their life. It's too late to just say, let it fall and regenerate the forest, because the cattle, which were never indigenous to Hawaii, will eat. If cattle can get in, there's wild feral cattle all over Hawaii. If it can get in, koa has no chance to grow. So if you want to go grow koa, you have to put in fencing. Now, I don't know the last time anybody listening put fencing paddocks into 5,000 acres of land, but you're talking millions of dollars of investment. Those landowners don't have that. So we come in and say, well, we could fix your land. We can take these specific trees. There's money that's worth. Instead of us paying you, we put that in some type of conservation escrow fund that we set up. And then we'll pay for the fencing. We'll do all the replanting. And I'm not talking take down a tree, plant a tree. You're talking take down a tree, plant 100 trees, So the money that generates can pay for a section of reforestation that's protected. It will not grow if there's cows, because they eat it every morning like a salad bar. Koa is a legume. It's a nitrogen fixer. It's a salad bar. And so that program there is different than the program in Africa, because it has different needs. Your needs are always changing, and they're different no matter where you go. So this is becoming very successful. On top of that, we own 600 acres of our own that we're completely reforesting. So now we have a road into it. We're building a sawmill so that we can cut wood more locally, and we'll plant 180,000 trees over the next 8 years. We did our first planting earlier this year. We'll do the first big planting earlier last year. I'm not used to the fact that it's just barely 2020. And so that one will put 180,000 trees over the next 45 years. There will be scheduled thinning programs to let these things get big. And at 50 years from now, that will have enough koa, improved koa, because we're planting the strains that we know to be good.
Right.
And on top of that, koa dies. Fusarium wilt, which is a virus that kills many plants, has made it to the islands a long time ago. So koa used to grow all the way down to the sea in the tropics. We have to grow koa up in the cold regions, 2,500 feet and above. But if global warming continues, it could warm up. And then fusarium could kill the trees that we grow. So with the help of some other researchers who put a lot of work into it, we know we can identify trees that are resistant to fusarium. You see, so if you're going to plant trees, you kind of have a responsibility to improve the species. So we know which trees have the figure and color we like through meticulous record keeping. We cut the tree, we log the tree, we know its GPS coordinates. We do the same thing in Cameroon. We turn it into lumber. We memorialize it by photographs. We tie that serial number to GPS locations. We can go back to the stump. When the stump starts putting up shoots, we do a technique called air layering, where you score around the outside skin of a shoot. You could say the bark, but it hasn't developed bark yet. That's a new young plant. It's growing up. It wants to be a trunk and not a branch. All the genetic information's in there. Put sphagnum moss around this, an ancient technique. Wrap it in plastic tin foil. They had tin foil 3,000 years ago too, you know. And put it in aluminum foil and walk away. 6 months later, 8 months later, you come back and there's a root ball growing in there. You cut it before and you have a plant. That's an exact clone of that plant that had good characteristics. So that's the one you want to grow. We can do the same thing through seed selection and who's the mother and who's the father, and kind of there's techniques for this. Fantastic. So we do all those, and then we select all the way down to Fusarium resistant koa. So we feel we have a good chance that in 50 years' time, those koas will be the right shape, the right size, the right characteristics, and alive. That could be a completely sustainable forest. You have to work your way to that because sometimes something's been depleted too much. Another project you mentioned, maybe a third leg to the stool that we talk about today, and there's more to talk about, right, but maybe we keep it to these three most interesting, is what we call urban forests. And there have been people over the years that, well, I have this tree, could you make a guitar out of it? And sometimes it's interesting enough to do that, but that's not the way to nirvana and using the forest canopy that's in cities that we live in. Right. So what I was looking for a long time is a source for urban woods that was large enough and steady enough and has incoming trees on a regular basis to allow us to make a model that's made out of a wood that's cut from cities. Why is it everyone sees an arborist out there? They're cutting down trees that are going to damage a pole line, right, a house. It's falling into a house. It's digging up the sidewalk. Right. It's hollow inside and dangerous. Someone's going to get killed. As we started looking into this, we found that there's this huge network of urban forest advocates, arborists, NGOs. U.S. Forest Service has been collecting data since 1978, I believe, on urban trees. They know everything about it, but they don't know what to do with it. So all these trees, they get cut and they get turned into firewood or mulch. They just get minced on the property. Some of these trees are 4 feet in diameter. They get minced up like firewood right where they stand so they can be hauled away. And it's like, is anybody thinking about these trees being used? Well, let's say if I said people should plant a rosewood tree in their yard, the next question is, well, where can I get a rosewood tree? So if there's not a nursery that makes one, you can't plant it. Right. I've learned a lot about nurseries through this, and it's amazing. Without a nursery, we're going nowhere, right? Without someone who's growing a plant. And, of course, without a market for a nursery to sell that particular species, it's going nowhere. Right. Well, we found here in Los Angeles, the one and only in the world that I know about, arborist, who has taken upon themselves to buy property and build a 20-acre log yard, and they're bringing the big trunks in. Logs. Wow. They're huge. You see a logging truck nowadays, and they have small logs. They're 12 inches in diameter. I'm talking about logs coming in that are 3 feet in diameter, 4 feet in diameter, because they grew for 100 years on the side of a street. It was a city tree, and the only thing they contract with cities, 300 cities in California and Arizona, they have the contract. There's 1,000 people with this company, and they had the foresight to put the logs there, but they didn't have a customer really for it. Slabs, tables, you're only going to go so far with that. Right. We married up with them. They're called West Coast Arborists. They're right here in Los Angeles, all through California, 1,100 people working for them in Arizona. And we took a lot of samples, looked at logs, looked at the supply, because if we make a guitar and make a real model out of it, so we have this new guitar, we call it the 324 CE Builder's Edition, but the back and sides are made from what we call chamois ash or urban ash. In reality, it's tropical ash from the tropics, which is lighter in weight than the northern ash that we think of for furniture up here. Right. And it was brought to Los Angeles 75 years ago, maybe more, by Mr. Schammel, and he really promoted it as city trees are beautiful trees, and they reached the end of their life. And so we have a steady supply. They have completely alerted everyone who's cutting. They used to cut it up in short lengths. Their saw cut would be 4 feet off the ground. There's a term in logging where you say something is such and such diameter ABH, which means at breast height. That's a couple 100-year-old term. So loggers cut trees at breast height.
Huh.
But we cut trees almost a V notch into the ground. We want all the goodness of that
right.
tree. So they're cutting low, they're cutting high, they're trimming the tree right. We're getting a long log. The logs are beautiful, and we're sawing them into guitars.
Wow.
And more important than that, we can tell the story so people can drive down their city streets or look at their own yard. My eventual build out of this, if I could live another 50 years, would be to see society think about trees that are grown. Maybe you're going to go to Home Depot tomorrow and plant a tree in your own yard. What tree? Which tree?
Right.
Maybe it could be a tree that in the fourth owner of your home down the road is going to cut that tree down because it's dying. It's going to fall on your house or, God forbid, the neighbor's house. You have to call an arborist and take it in, get it out. But at that point in time, what happens to it? Does it get mulched, or does it work its way back into society? Think about this. If you cut down a tree, the carbon is still sequestered in that log. If you burn it, it's released. If you mulch it, it's released. If you turn it into a guitar, that part that's the guitar is sequestered. If you turn it into a table, that part that's a table is still sequestered. There's more wood cut, there's more wood fiber cut in cities every year in the United States than there are in forests.
So what's so great about that program, it's the absolute perfect example of turning waste into food.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's using that waste into
Absolutely.
food, into a new product, completing a cycle.
It's an incredible way for somebody to... People have been asking me, well, what can I do, to help? And I go, well, that the marketing Taylor guitar-centric answer is, well, buy a guitar that we made this way. But up till today, there hasn't... Well, they could buy a guitar with our ebony that's cut properly, or the maple that's cut properly, or we use mahogany grown in Fiji that the British planted 100 years ago. So it's planted wood. But we all have to think about the fact that every time we buy anything for ourselves, I don't care what it is, every time you can't sit in your house and look up, down, left, right, all the way down to your underwear. The environment was used. So how do we use it? And I think it's a good time for people to become conscious about that, maybe align themselves with people who are doing that type of work. And yes, I care that Taylor survives or that we're preferred, but I want to be preferred for it being a finer guitar. And then what if at the exact same time it's preferred because the wood was used in the right way, or things we're putting things back? A company like Patagonia, we all know them as being very environmentally conscious. And they even, they have a catalog, and it's like, here's this thing you can buy. This is its environmental score. And it tells you. And it's like, they come over here, and here's the thing you buy, and they're just straight up honest about it. Well, the score is 20, it's not 100. If you need this, we just want you to know our world hasn't developed enough for us to make and sell this to be super proud of it. But as far as the environment goes.
Right.
But that's what it is. Over here, there's something. And they even started a program. It's like, don't buy a new jacket from us. Send your jacket back and we'll fix it and send it back to you. Right?
Right. So is it a challenge getting probably the older buyer, as opposed to the younger buyer, to think about other tone woods. I know there's a lot of education through Taylor on your sites on this. You do a great job on outlining the sound of each tone wood. But is it still a presented challenge getting that out to the consumer?
Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
But is it still a presented challenge getting that out to the consumer?
It's a bit of a challenge, but if the guitar is beautiful and sounds good, a lot of people aren't even sure what the wood is. But people do know the word rosewood. So they might come into a store, and that's the only thing they know about a guitar. Because maybe they're a new buyer. Well, I want a guitar. I think the challenge is more for the person selling the guitar. Because we have a consumer society where customer is king, but I don't believe customer is king. I don't believe it. I believe customer is an equal part of a system. So why should a company, who does a company serve? Well, a company should serve its shareholders, but that's not the most important. Companies should serve its employees, but that's not the most important. Companies should serve its suppliers, but that's not the most important. Company should serve its client. That's not the most important. If any one of those is the most important, the company goes bad. The company should serve the community around them. But none of those are the most important. They're equally important. Is my opinion more important than your opinion? No, it's not more important. I might actually be more right, or you might be more right, but it's not more important, right? So when we live in a place where the customer said this, well, it's like, well, why did the customer say that? Maybe that's the only thing the customer knows to say. So our challenge is usually to educate the person who's between me and the customer. I want a rosewood guitar. Oh, you do? Yeah. How, do you like the tone of it? Well, I don't know. My friend has a rosewood guitar, and I've heard of rosewood for a long time. Oh, okay. Well, maybe you do want a rosewood guitar. Let's look at some. But maybe you like this guitar or that guitar, you know? And so you just need someone to stop and take. I see a lot of companies that they look at social media and they just do whatever social media says.
Right.
That's not a leadership position.
And
you might make money selling what people want today, and then you might not make money when they don't want it tomorrow because you haven't figured out how to be a leader. My job in the ecosystem is to make a compelling guitar that's beautiful, and for me to spend my time going, what could be good for us, and what is it that I can do to put in my guitars and use my company for that ultimately is good, and then tell people about it and see if they'd like to participate. But if I spend my time just taking incoming opinions, I'm not going to get anything done.
Right. And speaking of leadership, and that's kind of a difference. This is where I do believe, besides being a fan, that Taylor is a leader in this, because there are those who are FSC compliant and CITES compliant, and they're doing all the regulatory steps. But are they doing things forward, that much forward thinking, the legacy that they're leaving behind? And that starts to narrow a bit. Not that others aren't trying, but there's also the innovation part of it that you've shown with the design of your guitars. That innovation is carrying over into your view and efforts in sustainability. That's why it's really so different than many others.
Yeah, I think we've gone farther. We have a saying, it's kind of a question. Do you want to get in for more? Or do you want to get out for less? Right. People are trying to get out for less. Who's trying to get in for more? I think that architecture is a great example, or home building, let's say.
Right.
The combination of architecture and construction. And let's just say you're building a house. It's not that hard to comply with the UBC codes, right?
Right.
It's not that hard. You can do a lot more than that. And some people do. Oh, well, code says I need to do this, but actually I'd like to do it better than that because I want to, right? And I see a lot of things that are done to code plus, because there's the letter of the law, there's the spirit of the law, but the code cannot enforce the spirit. It can only enforce the letter.
Right. Right.
And so if you have something like FSC, FSC is good. To date, we don't participate in FSC because I've never felt like I need a third party to tell my customer what I'm doing. I've been talking to my customers for 40 years, the good, the bad, the ugly, and they believe me, and there's substance behind what I do, and proof if you need to look. But I do think that FSC forestry is really fabulous. You know, they do a good job to gather all the woods necessary to build a guitar. To me, is a bit of a quest with no destination. I think I can do more. So yeah, and I have a guitar. Every piece on it's FSC. Well, I don't know where I'm going to get FSC spruce. It's not available. I don't know where I'm going to get FSC rosewood when I'm using rosewood. So the better thing is like, well, what's the purpose of this? Let me go in. For example, FSC ebony is impossible. It can't be done. Why? Because FSC doesn't certify a wood. It only certifies a forest operation. So the way it works in Cameroon is we have a permit called a special permit. That's the name of it, special permit, in the forestry industry. And that allows us to collect ebony and transform it and export it from certain designated places. But there's no forest management going on in those places. So we can't FSC a tree, FSC certify a tree or a wood. You can only FSC certify an entire operation. So now there's big forest management units, concessions through Cameroon that are FSC certified. But the person who owns that concession is disallowed to cut the ebony, and we're not allowed to take it from there. So it's against the law in Cameroon to take ebony out of a forest management unit, even if it's FSC certified. You can only take it from what they call the non-permanent domain. The non-permanent domain, if you think about it, is going to be that land that eventually is going to be converted into something else. And those are little tiny slivers, right? So there's no way to FSC certify it. So if I was someone who said, I can't do anything but FSC, I might go someplace that takes ebony out of an FSC certified forest in another country, and maybe I'll do that someday. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're replanting, doesn't mean that they're regenerating, doesn't mean that those people aren't bribing to get stuff out. I mean, it's the way of life in there, right? And so I know in my heart, the reason that we did this Ebony Project was so that I know myself how we get the wood, because it's really hard to get down to the truth in that part of the world. Really, really hard. As a matter of fact, when we did if you go to do the due diligence to buy ebony, this supplier is great. This company we bought looked great. But the due diligence we did to buy the company, everything was wrong about that company. Everything. And in the 11th hour, my partner from Spain, from Adindra, said, Bob, I can't buy this company. It's too illegal. And I said, Vidal, if we don't buy the company, you can never sell ebony as long as you live, and I can never use it as long as I live, because we know how it's obtained now.
Wow.
And you can't unknow what you know. and you can't unsee what you've seen. So our only hope to use ebony is to buy it ourselves and make it right.
Right.
Which is the choice that we made. So talk about jumping into a boiling pot.
Wow. Wow. And is there a challenge with, I suppose, I know there's challenges with working with the Far East, and you have an operation in Mexico, which you don't have that challenge necessarily working with China, but they are in Africa a lot. And is there a challenge
Everywhere.
with, I guess, competing for doing the right thing there?
Yeah, the industry is flooded with really cheap ebony. And we know, imagine that, I'm not a sports fan, but I'm going to use a sports analogy. Imagine that you're a football fanatic. You know every player in the NFL. And you watch them move from this place to that place. You hear what the coach is thinking. You hear the trader that, an owner wants to trade out some stuff. You even know that a new stadium might be abandoned, one might be abandoned and a new one built. You know everything about that industry. You know the inside gossip. You know it. Well, if you get in the ebony business, you know that industry. You know all the gossip. I know what was exported with export papers. And I know wood that appears and shows up in places. I know where ebony comes from. I know where it doesn't come from. So you go out. We had a conversation today with one of our clients. They're very interested in being legal. They live in a country that is starting to check, right? And they said, I just want to bring up the price because your ebony's more expensive. And this one, it's easy. We said, being legal costs money.
Absolutely.
Because what's happened isn't that it was legally cut once before and illegally cut now. It's cut in the exact same way. It's the what is legal, what is acceptable thing slid. It's being done in the way it's been done for ages. It's just that it hasn't caught up with being legal. Here's my example that I love to give. If I was a whaler in 1835 and I was going by the Galapagos, I would absolutely, definitely stop in and throw 100 or 200 turtles on board because they can live without eating. That's fresh meat for the next year.
Right. Wow.
And that was nothing wrong with it in 1835. Nothing wrong with it. But it became wrong. The same action today would be 100% totally wrong for all kinds of reasons. Right? So the action's the same, but our view of the action is different. Right? And now there might be some people who go, oh, yes, there was something wrong with it back then, but that's a difference of opinion. There's a jillion turtles. I'm one guy. I'm going to take some. Another ship will come by in a year. We didn't hurt the population. Same with even whaling until we took too many. So they say sometimes about nutrition or that anything that's good for you, too much of it can be poisonous. Right? Oxygen, water, too much water, kill you.
Right.
Not enough will kill you. And so in reality, I'm going to say this, it's not meant as an indictment, but our industry, naturally, many industries, but I'm talking about ours, musical instrument makers, we still kind of rely on wood that's obtained illegally. We don't know it. We're not doing it on purpose. But there's 100 years of price setting, of supply coming in, and most of the woods we use have moved along with times and have gotten really good. But some of the woods we use have been legalized, I would say. The heart of the matter isn't legal yet.
Right.
So this is why I'm in Cameroon, so that at least the wood that we touch it went from everything wrong to we're not 100% right, but I'll bet we're 95% right.
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 Now, do you feel that because at least with the U.S. manufacturers, U.S. guitar builders, and larger ones, I'm not talking necessarily about the more private luthiers. is there a bit more cooperation or at least conversation around sustainability?
Everybody's talking about
Yeah.
it, and everybody attacks it with their skill set.
Right. Right.
And that's a different skill set. There might be a company that's highly they require that their suppliers provide proof that things are right. You know, we do too. But on some of these things, let's just go do it ourselves. No, I don't know of any or many that don't care. Everyone's moving in that direction. And it's just a different way to go about it. And some people have there's some major manufacturers who have decided they'll buy ebony from our company. They don't buy it from Taylor. They buy it from Madinter. You know, they're a partner in this.
Right.
So our little sawmill there has two customers. Taylor is one customer. Madinter is another customer. Madinter's purpose is to buy wood from various sources. They happen to own this source, and then sell it to people so they can buy from there. But there have been people that have heard the story about what Taylor's like. Yeah, we want to buy that wood. That way we can, because we trust the owners to be telling us the truth.
Right. So the guitar industry, compared to, say, furniture and flooring companies, is a bit smaller, but it seems that there's because maybe it's the celebrity, the musicians, it seems like there is an opportunity for a larger voice.
There's no product like the guitar that has a bully pulpit to talk about things. It's Scott Paul, who is our Director of Natural Resource Sustainability, who was 14 years at Greenpeace, Director of the Forest Campaign, 35 years of conservation policy, working for big NGOs, governments. He knows this space very well. You, me, everybody listening, the corporate attorney that's trying to be CITES compliant, they're all amateurs compared to him.
Right.
You know?
Right.
He knows. Just because you're a musician doesn't mean you're a good road manager, even if you drive on a bus.
Right.
You know, there are people that have a slot, and this is his lane, and he knows what he's doing. But he said, Bob, I think I could do more for the environment here. He said this maybe after a year at Taylor than I could at Greenpeace.
Wow.
Because it's a bigger voice, not because Taylor's so huge, but that's part of it. We have 30 years of Wood and Steel magazine. It
Right.
it's huge. It's printed in 5 languages. You know, we can tell these stories. It's not just a catalog of guitars.
Right.
It's stories of things that we do. But everybody's interested in the guitar. Everybody in the Beltway in D.C. knows about the Ebony Project. The NGOs know about it. Universities know about it. Other countries know about it. They're interested because the guitar is a product that just captures people's attention.
Yes, it does.
And in reality, you think, well, we also use the poster child of every tropical wood that could be endangered. But a lot of the woods that are going to move to the IUCN Red List now, and a lot of the woods that will need to be CITES protected will be those woods that we thought were not in danger, because it's those North American temperate woods, oak, ash, whatever, cherry, that are used. And you can go into there was a huge case, Lacey case, on lumber liquidators 5 years ago, because there was wood coming out of the White Siberian Preserve, oak. It's just
Right.
oak. What's wrong with oak? Well,
Right.
What's the difference between legal wood and illegal wood?
Right.
Where it came from. Was it legally taken from a place that it can legally be taken? Right? And usually someone feels like there are several sources. It's not my problem. But Lacey says it's your business to know. And so that due diligence that you do. So I think every wood species, not just these exotics, will be talked about over the next 10 years. It will never be easier to obtain wood than it is today, which is a little harder than it was yesterday. All
Right.
the woods.
Right.
It's going to be hard. The whole world is looking at it. And so this is the world we live in. So bring it on. I'm happy to replant and to associate with people who do and to talk about it.
Right.
If you, I know, we just met. You asked for an interview.
Right.
And I'm happy to talk about this topic. If you said, hey, I want to talk about your new guitar,
right.
I've been doing that for 45 years. I go, well, you really need to make an appointment with Andy Powers. And it would have been harder for me to squeeze out the time for this with Solar Dave. But this is a message that I feel that if people can hear me talk about it, and here's a small company, they're planting thousands of exotic trees in a method that has an incredible chance to survive and work, and doing it out of the profits of business. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm funding a lot of this myself, but where did my money come from? Out of the profits of business.
Right. Absolutely.
So everybody can do something. And I have more excitement over urban wood than anything else, because we could, as a group of people, put the right tree, the right place, and there could be an end-of-life value. Where, for example, a landscape architect, they love multi-trunk trees, because you can go into a space in a new place, you put a multi-trunk tree in, and it starts taking up mass. It's so beautiful, even when you take it out of a 24-inch box. But that tree is absolutely useless for anything other than looking at.
Right.
It's useless for anything other than looking at. We've got to quit being so dang ornamental focused. How did we get so ornamentally focused? Because farmers and lumberjacks started doing our job for us.
Right. Right.
And so we just get stuff from the store and we don't know. And meanwhile, it's like, oh, that's beautiful. That's what I want there because it's beautiful. We got to learn what else is beautiful. How about a nice straight tree that goes up? The forest the urban canopy is disappearing. You go down these old places, you're in Charleston or Savannah, or you're in some Midwest place, and you see these trees that cover the asphalt street in a yard, and you're just driving through a tunnel of shade, and you're like, wow. Well, those tunnels of shades were planted so people could park their horses on the street and them not die of heat stroke. That's what they were for. Yeah. So back then, there was a reason for that tree to be planted that way. They needed it. Otherwise, you come back out to your car and it's dead.
Absolutely.
And if you pull into, the Safeway parking lot or Vons or Ralph's, Home Depot, everyone's looking for the parking space that has a little shade. So your car's not 180 degrees when you come out. We do it every day. Every person that's listening goes, yeah, I do that. Well, shade is a really important thing. Yes. Make shade, but don't make multi-trunk shade, and don't do why would I plant a fruitless plum? Well, because it's purple and it's part of what I want. Okay, that was fine. But it could be more fine to say, well, I'm going to plant, I'll just say an urban ash, a chamois ash, in this place, far enough from a curb. It's going to grow up. It's going to be beautiful. And one day when it comes out, someone will make something from it. No one's making anything from a multi-trunked fruitless olive tree. And meanwhile, why not plant something that feeds you at the same time?
Right.
Half of my front yard is converted to edibles now. It's beautiful. Neighbors stop by. What's that? Oh, that's my onion patch. Wow. Your onion patch? It just looked like landscaping at first.
Right.
So this is the message. Everyone could do a little bit and do something that they will never benefit from. So if I were to, what could be better for me to go find a tree? I'm a user of trees. People might go, oh, self-interest. No, it's all of our interest. When somebody needs a tree, me, you, anybody, everybody out there needs a tree. If you ever bought a piece of wood in your life, you need a tree. If you ever bought a house in your life, you need a tree. If you ever bought a cutting board, a table, a chair, even a sofa that's upholstered, you need a tree. So what's better than going to a tree that has pavement that goes to it, that somebody watered, trimmed, fertilized for 100 years.
Right.
I mean,
Wow.
to me, so this is unusual speak. This is like, wow, this is crazy talk they're talking about.
No.
Oh, this guy has an ebony mill, and you're interviewing me because what I'm doing is special and unusual. It's highly interesting.
Right.
Someone asked me the other day, well, what do you want 100 years from now? I said, for this to be boring, because everybody does it.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, for me to not be special, for it to just be boring, for me to not have any marketing edge at all.
Right.
I don't want Taylor to have a marketing edge because we do this. I would prefer that everybody does it, and we got to look for another marketing edge.
Right.
Know what I mean?
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, I'll ask a couple questions. What would you say to other U.S. manufacturers, and then what would your message be to the consumer? But you've really encapsulated both of those questions through this entire interview. And again, Taylor's always been about innovation. I keep coming back to that, but it is really a way of a vision. Being a visionary, looking much farther than just next week, next year, and into the future. And I certainly don't get the sense that it's anything to do with wanting it. It'll be part of your legacy, but that's not the purpose of it, to build on the legacy.
It's true. 10 years ago, I heard about the trees in Fiji. And I said to myself, I'm using these trees that some long, long dead person planted, and I don't know their name. I want to be that guy.
Wow. That is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Taylor, or Bob.
The unknown guy in the future.
Yeah.
I don't know where these trees came from, but
Right.
somebody planted them. I don't care if I'm known.
Right. Well, I know myself, and I know many of the listeners appreciate so much of what Taylor's doing. Not just what they're building, which is huge, but also what you're doing elsewise with it's really beyond sustainability. In a way, sustainability almost seems limiting. And I can't, for myself, think of a better word to describe it. But I know there is a better word. I know there's more to it. But again, really can't tell you how much we appreciate your time to spend with us. Look forward to speaking with you again.
Okay,
in the
Lynn.
future.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank
Just
you
a pleasure.
So much.
Thank you
so much.
Yeah, man.